It's always so exciting.
Welcome to Las Dras podcast, featuring your favorite profas bringing women and gender studies topics out of the university and onto the kitchen table.
I'm Cristina, Chicana, Pinay, queer, Sha, ella, traveler, Earth, Mama Bruja.
I'm Renee, Mexicana, Tejana, Chicana, she, her, ella, Mama Bruja scholar and scribe.
Together, we are the academic and word brujas creating revolutionary spaces outside the walls of the ivory tower to cast spells, read the ancient texts, and tell our sacred stories. We make this magic as an offering to our ancestors, to those who will come after us, and for the change we wish to see in the world. Salud!
Welcome. We are in episode 51.
Gosh, can't believe in the cincuentas. That seems really important.
Yeah, season 5. So we're here with an amazing guest. We're
just an honor.
I'm trying to think this season. Oh yeah, we've had I think one other guest, but yeah, it's been an interesting season. Anyway, so we're glad to have this guest.
We're just going with the flow. We're listening. We're dropping into curiosity and into guidance.
Yes, trusting.
And that leads us here. Right,
yes,
right here.
So we're gonna go ahead and just turn it over to our guests, have them introduce themselves. And we are excited for whatever magic this conversation brings us. So
welcome, Meenadchi.
Hello. Hi, everybody. My name is Meenadchi. My pronouns are she, her. Currently, I'm on Ohlone land, but my people are from Sri Lanka. So my family's from Jaffna, which is the northernmost area of the island. And then my astrology things, fun little insights. big Cancer sun energy on the cusp of Leo.
Very me too, I think.
It shows, it shines.
Yeah. I see the similarities there. Yeah.
Capricorn rising, Sagittarius moon.
Ooh.
Wow. And then what I have found, I think my Cap rising is really important and my Cancer sun, but more importantly than my moon is my Virgo is in Venus. And precision. Right there. Super much.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Venus says something about like love language?
Like touch, like the earthiness of the Virgo and things, maybe some.
That's because Venus is love, right? Is the planet of love. So it just dawned on me like that could say something about our love language. But anyway,
you're thinking of some specific examples.
No. Venus in Virgo?
Yeah.
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is.
I think like Marie Kondo too. There's something like there's a thing about.
Yeah. I'm like, hold on, I'm gonna check where my Venus is.
Yeah.
Like it just when you said that, I'm like, my Venus is in Gemini.
Ooh. Gemini rising. This is maybe some of the.
Okay.
That Capricorn rising, though, that's beautiful too.
Wait, when's your birthday then?
July 20th.
Oh, mine's July 19th.
Oh, how
lovely. I love it.
That's so sweet. Of course, you're Cancers. So you're all so, what is it, Hufflepuffy?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we should start asking. What's your Hogwarts house?
Oh, what a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence here and all your patience.
Yeah. I think one more thing as part of your introduction is just tell us like who you are, what do you do, what's your work, what's your as June would say, what's your story medicine?
Love some June. I know. My magic and my work is kind of in two realms, which for me very much dovetail together. One is nonviolent communication, specifically with like a decolonial trauma-informed lens. How are we talking? What are the words that we're using? And weaving both within our own bodies and then within the collective body. And then Family Constellation Therapy, which came into my life in 2017 as a modality for really clearing out intergenerational gunk that's in the nervous system. Because all of that stuff, you know, it also shapes how we talk to ourselves and it shapes how we talk to each other. So those are my areas of medicine and magic.
I attended one of your happy hours in the last few weeks, and it was an hour. Actually, I would think I was a little late, actually, just 45 minutes. And it was just super grounding and altering. Like I can feel the neurons in my brain, like shifting just within that time frame. So I think what you bring is a gift.
Thank you.
And I think we wanted to kind of establish for our listeners, I'm like, I don't know if we've ever directly spoke to nonviolent communication. I mean, we did an episode with Leslie, you know, of Latinx parenting. So obviously so much of her work is grounded in this. But I think for us, obviously it was through parenting that we came to nonviolent communication. I think our investment, well, I'll say, I know you have your story, but I think for me, it was seeing the way that my parents parented me and the good and the bad and really wanting to do something different. And then I just thought it was that easy, right? I thought, oh, it's as easy as saying, I don't want to do it like that. And then when I became a parent, realizing, oh, it's not that easy when that's all you know, when that's the default. And it's been the default for so many generations. So it kind of led me on this path of figuring out a new way to parent, first of all, and then realizing that so much of parenting is really about like self-parenting and also like like, you know, even I took, you know, Leslie's course, and so much of what she said was like, you know, this is more than just about how we communicate with our kids, but how we communicate like with each other. And then again, recognizing that so much of the default communication styles are remnants of colonization. It's like, oh, even more so, I'm invested in doing something different. And that being said, and I think something you'll speak to as well, Cristina, is in our trying to practice nonviolent communication, I think a couple of challenges always come up. One is there's still that default, right? There's still that like colonial default that is hard to unlearn. And when we do practice nonviolent communication with people who are not necessarily invested in that, it creates some resistance, right? Like it's hard for us, like we're trying to resist our own like colonial, you know, like inner voice, and trying to do our best to, you know, lead with empathy and lead with you know, nonviolent communication. And then when we don't receive that back, it gets really, really challenging for us. But
maybe that's where we can maybe like kind of a vision for, this is my conclusion to this essay that we're writing today, is we can expand into what then, you know, where do we go then, you know? But I came into nonviolent communication in 2009. I was living on a farm with 4 other women, and we were doing community, you know, work together, both internally and externally. I had just left an abusive marriage, and it gave me some giraffes and some jackals, some different ways to understand the violence I had experienced in my life, and ways to speak to my needs. And later on, maybe with Leslie. But I think even before I met Leslie, I met my friend Suzanne, who was at one of your lessons, one of your classes up in the Pacific Northwest, and she was saying, "Oh, nonviolent, decolonizing nonviolent communication." She was like in awe about how it meant much more than the was it Rosenberg yeah so much more that when she brought up someone saying like your kids need, I don't know, better clothes or something, like better jackets, the decolonial nonviolent response would be like, well, please pay for them then, like please contribute to an equitable situation here, in order for us to move forward. And I think that lens in your book, we'll put that into the notes and everything like that, have been revolutionary for me and taking me into my life now. And yes, I have had conversations with people where I've tried to use this a nonviolent approach, and it has met up with a big wall. And so I have just heard that and let that be, and then walked into a different place. With my child, it has brought up, right, the colonial perspective, this binary one where we are somehow better than our children. And that is much more of an internal process. And it is a beautiful one, but it is maybe the hardest work I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no, it's for sure. I laugh because I'm just going through all the memories that I've had to encounter with my kid, right? Like, yeah, there's nothing, like, I thought I had done some work. And then my youngest, especially, I was like, oh yeah, no, I've still got some work to do, which I think is, all part of the plan. But I think that, sharing our experiences, and we'd love to hear from you. One, I think, again, there's so much talk about nonviolent communication, but I think there's a lot of misconceptions also around, like, and people misunderstanding, gentle parent, like there's just all this terminology, and sometimes things get co-opted, things get watered down, like things get all mixed up. And we'd love to hear your definition. And I think specifically the way in which you talk about decolonizing nonviolent communication and what it is that you mean by that.
Okay. So many good questions. So many. Okay. Yeah. I think I'll start by sharing my origin story of like how, so my people were Tamil, and 3 days after I was born, I wasn't born in our homeland. I joke a lot because I was born in England, which was like our last colonizer of Sri Lanka. But 3 days after I was born, our home country burst into civil war because my people wanted a separate homeland because of the ethnic strife and safety and so many other things that were happening there. And in 2002, there was a ceasefire. And there were kind of like, there was a de facto state, you know what I mean? Like the rebels had gotten a certain area that was our own homeland, and then there was the greater Sri Lankan nation. These are all really weird words. Like language, right? I don't even have the language. What do we, if we're like wanting to say that the state doesn't, So there was a ceasefire. And so a lot of people who were living in the diaspora were going home, right? Because it was the first time in so long that we were able to go home in like a safe way and see people. So I was home for the Christmas holiday. And my amma, who's my mother, had told me that there was a woman in Berkeley who was doing a fundraiser because she was going to move back to Sri Lanka. She was Sri Lankan Tamil. She was going to move back home and she wanted to go teach nonviolent communication. And both Amma and I were like, we don't know what that thing is, but we got to find out who this woman is. Who are you? Like, join your team, whatever. So her name is Jayanti Siva, and I call her Jayanti Akka, which means big sister. And she's been a really big part, like a really transformative person in both mine and my Amma's life, and also in our personal relationship, because for both me and my mother, it was the first time that either of us had access to thinking about what are these needs and feelings, and how are we talking to each other, and why are we talking to each other in certain particular ways. And I feel like I'm rambling, but I think the place where I'm trying to go is that, like, one, I feel really lucky that I got introduced to this modality through someone from my homeland who has a cultural context and has a much broader understanding of what violence means. Two, over the course of many years, because Janthiaka was living in Ceylon for like, I don't know, for well over a decade. So Amma and I both got to go back a lot and do NVC work with her there, again, like with our people and doing all of that stuff. And so Janthiaka was the one who introduced me to the concept of decolonizing it, because the way nonviolent communication was set up in the US and the kind of formulaic methodology of it just didn't translate. It didn't work. And it didn't also match the context of what our community, what our peoples actually needed, and how we needed to go into language and healing tools. So I think, that's a little bit of how I got into it. And then in terms of like, what I always say when I teach is this stuff is really here. When I offer, it's like for you, for me to understand and for me to assess, am I speaking in a way that meets my definition of nonviolence, not to change or alter your definition of nonviolence, not to alter or change anything that you are doing, but am I meeting my own needs and values and definitions? And for me, my definitions of nonviolence.
We're like trying to take we both looked at the pen and paper. We're like, okay, someone's taking notes.
I just need my own.
Right, because if we're operating from the premise that everybody is always doing the best they can and everybody is always trying to meet their own needs, I don't think anybody ever, very rarely, I mean, obviously there are people who are trying to enact harm, and that's a little bit different. But most times people think that they are doing something that's for the best, even when it is drastically not for the best. So if I can understand that as like a baseline principle, then it's up to me to be kind of like, how do I want to show up in this dynamic? And that often means centering my authenticity. So I know that I like, right now I'm kind of in this kind of interview, and I have like my what I call my facilitator voice, which can be kind of very soft and gentle, but like sometimes the most nonviolent thing is to say, fuck off, I don't want to deal with you. Like, because it's not about it's not that these words, this list of words or this box of words or this behavior is inherently violent. It's what is the context, and are you showing up as you want to show up? And I think, lastly, yesterday, a colleague and I were working with an Indigenous harm reduction team here in Turtle Island to bring some NVC skills into and they already know what they're doing, you know what I mean? But a lot of times it's like we don't have the language to even articulate what it is that we're doing so that we can intentionally choose it. But it really tends to come back to, can I speak in a way that honors my dignity? And can I speak in a way that honors, it's like, can I speak in a way that holds both of our dignity? Or in trying to speak in a way that honors your dignity, am I required to sacrifice my own sense of self-worth or my own sense of dignity? And if that answer is yes, then maybe I need to step away from this conversation. Yeah. Maybe I don't actually have the capacity, right, to show up to this conversation. But it's the idea that like, when we can talk to each other, when my dignity is intact enough, how do I then show up?
What a question to ask ourselves. Honestly, and I think, actually, I can see why it would lead into Family Constellation, or it would lead into like a larger story, because that feels, actually, I'm kind of overwhelmed by that. Can I speak?
I was thinking, I think Cristina and I have experienced multiple different situations where we've been trying to do our best to lead with, nonviolent communication. And I think the way that you're framing it here, like, I'm like, man, I get it. Like there's, because the idea of how can I speak in a way that honors my dignity or holds both our dignity, and that if my dignity is not intact, then I don't even need to be here, right? Like, then I don't need to give it. It's actually, and it has me thinking about nonviolence actually means nonviolence to ourselves, right? Like, we shouldn't be that should be the number one thing, is like, how are we going to be in this space without harming our own self? And which reframes a lot of the interactions that we've had with people, that we should have probably, the least violent thing to have done would have been to leave a lot sooner than continuously trying to do something that was being met with resistance. And that's the tricky part, because there's this, I know in me, the cancer in me wants to like give everybody a chance and give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and if they just understood. And when it keeps getting hit with a wall, it's harder I think you see it a lot sooner than I do. But that just reframes so many things.
I should disclose my Mars is in Cancer. I just want to say that. I don't know that.
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
I'm like, yeah, I some read it as passive aggressive. Some read it as like we can move like a crab in multiple spaces, and I do. There have been times when we've had encounters with someone who is not interested, and I've been like, I'm out.
Yeah,
but I think knowing that dignity, knowing what dignity feels like in the body, I still think I stay too long in spaces where I am not honored. I'm okay with the violence, there is something like my wounded self or my, survivor self is actively harming, judging, harming, violent, like myself. And we are moving more and more into stepping into safe space, brave space within, I think we are actively doing that, and we're doing it together in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so that's really wonderful. But
I just appreciate this framing of, I think it defines even what violence is, right? And then how so much of, it's like, what's the, like, almost like martyrdom, right? Where we feel like we have to, I don't know. It's
gendered.
It's that internalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
That internalized violence, almost that internalized harm, where we feel like, oh, we have to kind of sacrifice ourselves, for whatever it be. And that ultimately, it's our dignity. Shit. It seems so simple.
But there's we're talking astrology, but there's also the gendered violence. There is the racialized violence, minoritization, in different ways. I mean, it's not just us.
No. And it's macro and micro, it's all the things. But so I love that. And I think that being said, then, like you said, how does maybe that come into play? And you can tell us more about your work with Family Constellation Therapy. We'd love to hear about that.
So juicy. Okay, so first, to loop back a little, there was something. Oh yeah, it's this piece around I have done and said things that I am not proud of, and that for me, I do define as those were violent actions and violent behaviors on my part. I've also stayed in situations where the result was then violence was enacted upon me, or I experienced things that were not healthy or good for me. And I think that one, it's a question of capacity. And as you were talking about dignity, and almost there's this energy of duh, how obvious, and also if you've been denied access to having your needs for dignity met, there's a scarcity that sets in of not actually believing that I can get my needs for dignity met anywhere else, or not actually trusting that I can get my needs met in any other dynamic, that this is the only type of relationship that's accessible or available to me, like that this is the only container, this is the only space. Like, because I think in order to actually take ourselves out of a relationship or a situation that isn't working, we have to believe that something else exists. And if you've never experienced something else, then how the hell are you gonna, it's kind of like that crisis of imagination.
I mean, I feel like in those moments, it's like, what I don't know. I've been there. You've probably been there. We've all been there. Where like, I don't know what exists outside of this space, but it has to be better. Like, I can't even imagine it, but I know that this can't be all that there is. It was like this leap of faith to step into like, capacity. That's a keyword. And we were talking just about this yesterday.
Keyword.
Look, we're like on the stoop. I did. I watched. Anyways, I've been watching old shows. Okay.
And I feel like for me, constellation work has come in to build capacity and to build capacity for dreaming and build capacity for believing. Because for folks who are unfamiliar, family constellation therapy is a somatic modality. It is Zulu in its origin, and then a German missionary named Bert Hellinger came, studied, lived in South Africa for 16 years, and then created his own version of this ancestral healing modality, which then got called family constellation therapy. And a lot of what we're doing with that work is we're looking at like, what is a pattern in an individual person's life that keeps repeating? And then if there's a stuckness or something that keeps looping, chances are it's related to something intergenerational that hasn't been held or healed. And I, like the very first time I was in a family constellation, I represented someone who had caused a lot of harm within the family, like really horrific harm. And by the end of the constellation, I remember being so apologetic and I think so terrified of how much harm I had created. And I don't remember the experience of like, the person who was receiving that constellation, that experience was their own, but for me, one of the big takeaways was it was the first time that, we all know that hurt people, but like to actually feel it in your body and to be like, oh, the shit that went down really wasn't about me. For me, constellation work like takes me into that space of actually feeling in my body that other people's shit isn't about me. And then that gives me more space to be present, whether it's with the stuff of mine that needs healing, or if I want to choose to be present with somebody else, maybe where there's been impact, right? Because there's more spaciousness if I really trust that it's not about me and if I'm not internalizing it.
There's some things I feel like you've said that, and I've experienced the constellation process, but and Renee hasn't. And so I would love a little description of.
Yeah, I was just about to ask.
The
like,
role
walk us through.
Yeah. Okay. It's hard. It's like trying to describe the ocean to someone. It is. I've been in the rain. No, it is something else. So when I facilitate constellation work, one, there's a really broad definition of family. The air is our family. The wood is our family. You don't need to know your blood lineage in order to be able to access healing through constellation work, because family is in the field and it's in the energy around us. We'll always start by asking. So the person who's receiving the work is called the seeker. And we'll ask them, what do you want to receive from this piece of work? What gift would you like to come out of it? And then in terms of like facilitating, you can do work one-on-one, or you can do work with a group of people. And it's so beautiful when it's with people, because there's always something magic in a collective container. But a person will share something that they want to work on, they want to address, they want to resolve. Like recently, I just finished teaching this series on discerning between trauma and intuition. So we might start, right, by bringing in a representative, asking someone to come in as a representative, like one representative for Renee and then one representative for Renee's intuition. And what happens in the work, and this is the part that I don't know how to explain, information just starts coming up in the body. People start to feel body sensations. And it's not the same as channeling, because sometimes people get messages. I think that kind of depends on people's own gifts and stuff. But people just feel body sensations. And the number of times when like people have shared their body sensations and then the seeker has been like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I feel when I'm trying to access my intuition, right? And we'll kind of weave through whatever it is that might need to be surfaced or held or witnessed so that the blockages can be released and the person can actually feel connected to whatever it is they want to be connected to, or free from whatever it is that they've been holding, right? And sometimes like,
it's a really cool role playing. I mean, I don't want to like say, but it's like role playing modality of, and it kind of different parts. I loved how we worked with objects in the happy hour that I was a part of.
Yeah.
Almost like, yeah, like tarot, or almost like that space where, you know, where you know, we hear some music in the background. You're like wondering where it's coming from. No, yeah, it's like we do with our writing or the images, but now we're looking at people and conversations and that the energy in between these the objects or subjects at play almost. Yeah,
it's fun.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I think it totally makes sense to me. I mean, I'm sitting here like, shit, I need to do this.
I was like, maybe we should work with Meenadchi.
Yeah, no, I think that if anyone's familiar with any kind of any healing modality within this realm, it's going to kind of, you know, make sense to like you said. I understand, you know, like you said, it's not necessarily channeling, but along those lines of the body sensations,
intentionally, like
I'm thinking
presence.
Like breath work kind of stuff, right? Where when you're doing breath work, right? Like your body kind of starts to have this reaction, right? Without knowing, right? Yeah, tell us more.
I think the way I think of it is just how information is in the field. You know, like I think about like this desk that I have. I like invested in a desk so that I could feel beautiful at my workspace. And like the truth is there's so many ancestors embedded in this desk. There's so many people from wherever the wood was sourced, to where the wood was painted, to how it was constructed, to like the metal that made the handles, the people who held it while it was shipping. There's so many ancestors who lovingly poured into this desk that enabled it to be a resource for me here while I'm talking to the two of you. So it's like when we tap into the energy that's actually present, information emerges. And I always tell folks like different practitioners have different vibes and like, you know, things. So you got to find someone who works for you. And like the school of thought I come from and the teachers that I come from is also that we don't have to heal our ancestors' baggage. We can honor our ancestors, right? We can celebrate them. We can remember them, but you're not actually responsible for healing their trauma. Our ancestors can do their own shit. And so like, but that's like a thing that intellectually, like maybe I don't know, you know what I mean? But like in our bodies, we don't always feel that.
Yeah. I mean, it's bringing me back to something you were talking about with, you know, you were talking about your origin story with nonviolent communication and it really starting with your mom. And it had me remembering that a lot of the work that I've done for myself around nonviolent communication, yes, a lot of it was with my kids and as a parent, but I would say the majority of my work has been with my mother. Because I think for so long I'm not going to be like my mom, you know, I'm not going to be like my mom. And again, I thought it was that simple. So that when I became a parent and realizing it wasn't that simple. It had me have a kind of empathy for my mom in a way that I had never had before. Because I think I didn't see her as human. I saw her as my mother. and it took me to see her as human, to have empathy for her, that I was able to. And so that's really been my lessons, right? Is in how I've been able to, and then like you talk about, we don't have to heal, we don't have to do their work for them. And yet, because I've been able to change my own like way to, I mean, this is not to say we don't ever yell at each other still. We definitely have those moments, but because I can have empathy for her in a way that I hadn't before, then I'm able to release myself from her shit. Like I can say, oh, that's about you. That's not about me. That's, that's your stuff that you're dealing with. That's your anxiety. You're projecting it. And then I can go a step further and actually like articulate that like almost to her. And then and lately, just in the last maybe year, I've then even been able to like give her permission to like do her own shit, right? Like I'll tell, recently my mom, she's gonna maybe be mad I saying this on the podcast, but she is, so my dad's in
She doesn't listen though, right?
No,
just
she
someone will
doesn't.
come into the shop.
Someone will tell her.
Someone will tell her. Yes, yes.
My father's been passed away for 8 years. I was the only partner my mom ever had, but she's now been in this new relationship for
that's the part.
maybe 3-4 years now, and they've kind of become committed. Whatever that means.
You're totally giving the whole story. I love it.
And it was funny because my mom's really was expressing how nervous she was about what that means, and I was like, Mom, you're in your 60s. You're not trying to start a family or do nothing. I said, you get to define what commitment means to you and what it doesn't mean. And you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do in a commitment. And that's the next level. What I mean, right, is this next level of what I think is communication, is like, because I've been able to define that for myself in my own relationship, because I released myself from her expectations. Then I can come back to her and be like, now you can create new expectations for yourself. And I've seen how our relationship has changed over time. So in that, like, I don't have to do her work. I get to do my own work. But in getting to do my own work, I get to heal our relationship and the ways that we communicate. And then hopefully it eventually ends up helping her do her own work, But I'm not going into it with that investment, like I'm not expecting her to do anything.
It's been quite beautiful to witness this, to witness the relationship. I mean, in the last few years, I've seen this, I think when you first told me, like, we just like yell it out, and
totally.
And I was like, oh, okay.
I think it worked for a bit, because it was just, it was what it was. That was all we had, was to just argue it out.
So I just think it's beautifully tremendous, actually. I just want to witness, a witness of this relationship, and I just think, wow,
it's possible.
Well,
I know.
I think it gets me into a place, because I think with my parents, I actually just be like, I'm gonna walk away. I'm gonna walk away. You're gonna work on your own, but I think that's where Family Constellation is beautiful too, because I do need the work of, because it won't be with them. It will be with myself, with the healing modalities, with whoever, I'm working with, to help understand what's not mine, and what is mine, and where I want to move forward, or where can I move forward into it.
Yeah. My friend Io, she said one time, sometimes we think that doing other people's work for them is a shortcut, but it just becomes a shortcut to hating people. It's so much resentment and disaster. Yeah. But
I love the idea. I mean, I think that is a Cancer thing, that we love to have something pretty to work at. Because when you said I invested in this desk, same thing. This desk, actually, my mom bought for me. I know. My mom bought me this desk when I went into grad school. And it was like because I had graduated with my master's and I was going into my PhD program. And it was like my graduation / congratulations gift. And it was a pretty penny. And I had it in storage for a really long time when I had kids, because that was my most important baby. And then when I moved into this house, I was like, I want my desk back. I want, and but when you talk about the ancestors that like took it to a whole nother level. Now it's like, oh, there's this deeper energy beyond just the aesthetic, right? Because and I've really I'm down for a good aesthetic. Like, I feel like that's my self-care. I want my environment to look pretty, and that makes me feel good, and that makes,
sometimes it's the visual, but sometimes it's the energy, I think, too.
Yeah.
Right? Is that where that you're talking
so
about.
I love when you say, and I hadn't even thought about that, right? Like, where the wood comes from, and the woodworkers, like that just takes it to a whole nother level. And also loving the way that that's defined as family, right? Because we do a lot of ancestral work, and people are often, they get stuck in if they don't know who their ancestors are,
or they don't like them,
we
have to qualify, and or expand the definition of ancestors.
Like, who are the ancestors? So I love that, even like, who is family, right? Like that. And even beyond just chosen family, but thinking, and you keep saying the field, right? Like the water and the earth. And again, that makes everything just feel so different.
I'm wondering how we're going to do this with our children. Sorry, that's I want to go with this. I'm like, how do I, and maybe that's the next step. And that would be a beautiful step. I think I've been wanting to work with Meenadchi more. So I was like, maybe I'll just work in that.
So then what comes to me too is, you're talking about, so there's always, just like there's these ongoing conversations around nonviolent communication, there's these ongoing conversations about intergenerational healing, right? And so you're saying that we don't have to do the healing work for them. So then what is intergenerational healing if it's not
It's a good one.
doing the work for our ancestors? Because don't we often hear that, like, oh, we're healing ourselves so that we heal our ancestors?
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from you is maybe a different framing of that. And I would love for you to maybe speak to that.
I think it's a really subtle difference where, yes, when we're doing, it's like that very subtle difference about like, I'm not a parent, right? But like, I know that one of the things that is important for parents is to have some degree of self-care, because your children need the best version of you. They don't actually need necessarily all of your attention all the time, even though it feels that way, right? Your children need the best version of you. And so then it's the question of, when you're doing that, are you doing that just so that your kids can have a good parent, or are you really invested in your well-being and trust that the ripple effect is that your kids are gonna, have benefits, that your friend relationships, that your partner, that everybody, that the ripple effect of like, if I am showing up as the best version of me, then everybody gets something good. And I think about it like the scene from When Harry Met Sally, right? Like, it's like that. It's like, I picture the ancestors at a snack bar, and like, when you sit down and have a good snack, like the ancestors are like, yo, I'll have whatever she's having. And then like people start doing their own work.
I love that. That makes total sense to me.
Yeah. I was thinking, I went to my bisabuela Rose. She's buried, in one of these cemeteries. I have like it. And I went to her grave one time, and I said, because there's a long stories of toxic relationships with toxic masculinity in our family. And I was just like, I am not going to do that. I'm not going to put up with that anymore. It stops here with me, and so I've tried to be true to that, moving forward. So that's how I would say that. But I love the idea, like, it's our joy, and stepping into our pleasure and like who we are, that kind of also creates the generational healing back and forward. This is why I'm back in Southern California. I wanted Jaguar to know the me that was here, that is here, you know, which is a little different in the Pacific Northwest. You know, I wanted to love dancing, love, you know, all of our things, you know.
Yeah. Well, I hear it's about the intention, because what I heard you say was that if we're just doing self-care so we can be the best version for our kids, but the intention then is still about them, versus are we doing it for ourselves, and then it becomes a ripple effect. And I've often had to catch myself when my kids were younger and I had to go back to work, you know, after so much time with them. And I mean, even now, sometimes they'll be like, I just want to be with you all day, mommy. And I'm like, ugh. And I used to get into what my mom would tell me is, I go to work so I can put a roof over our head. And so I can put, you know, all these things. And I used to say that. And I caught myself one time being like, well, yeah, that's like the bare minimum, right? That's what we should be doing for our kids. And then I started reframing it and to say that I go to work because I love what I do. And I would say, one, I want you to eventually love whatever it is that you choose to do. But it helps me feel good. So then when I am with you, I like that. Like I'm a better mom when I get to go do the things that I love. Or when they would say, because when my husband and I go on date night, they would be like, can we go on date night with you? And I would try to tell them, like, it's important for mommy and daddy to have time for ourselves together, you know, as a couple, again, so that when we come back and we're a family, we're bringing, you know, that love that we, you know, established long before they were born, you know. So, but it's like, so that makes sense when you're saying it's that we're not trying to heal so that our ancestors can heal. We're healing and then hoping that the byproduct of our own healing is that they too are invested in healing. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And I might even say, not even hoping, but just trusting. Just trusting when I do my own work, it becomes easier for everybody else to do theirs. And my work doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be stressful. And a lot of my work is to not do everybody else's shit. Like to, again, just like trust we can each do our own thing and it will be okay.
It's letting go of that illusion of control, like that we could curate the future or curate healing, you know, or know what it is, or like, 'cause I think we're so used to thinking a couple steps ahead out of like
survival,
some strong narratives, you know, that we grew up with, but it's saying we can only just know like what is, you know, meeting our needs, what is like feeling good in my body, what is, you know, that's right.
And I love when you say that the work should be, how you said, right? Like that's where we've been. Our energy is like, we're leading with joy, right? Like what makes us feel good. And I've even been doing that as a professor. I've really been trying to, I think there was a time when I was like starting to have this resentment towards work, and something that I have, you know, I do love doing what I do. But when I started noticing I wasn't really feeling it, I was like, ooh, it's time to change, because I can't change my career outright right now, but I can change the way I do my work, right? That's what I do have control over. So I really sat at the beginning of the semester and was like, how can I bring the joy back into what I do in a way that feels good? And I've actually been very transparent, even with my students, about that, right? Like that's why the workload is less for them, because it's less, because I'm trying to make it less for me, for myself. And why, you know, there's just different ways in which I've structured, you know, my semester so that it feels, you know, like it's fun again. And the way I've framed it for them, coming back to even decolonization, is that this is my way of decolonizing the way that the university puts these standards and expectations on us, right? They say you have to go to class twice a week and you have to do 8, you know, all this amount of work, and you have to do this work in a certain way in order to meet these, you know, the criteria of whatever. And I'm kind of like, no. I'm not going to do that. And I've been very transparent with them and saying, this is, when I talk about decolonization in my classes, I'm doing it both in the content and the form of how we're doing this semester. Like how we're doing it is, an attempt at decolonization in and of itself. So I'm like, we're not going to have class every time. We're not going to meet face to face every single time. Because that would, it's about quality versus quantity.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get the best of me if I, structure in this way versus if I just try to grind my way, through the semester. I
was like, Virgo sun. My Virgo sun is really having like, I just realized I get so caught up in grind, like so much.
But also this makes so much sense of why y'all are such a power couple, because Virgos and Cancers, power couple.
Wow. Really? I mean, we know that, but tell me more.
I just like see it over and over. Like so many of my very good friends are Virgo suns, and there's
is
like
Carissa a Cancer?
I don't know.
Leslie,
I'm trying to think.
Have you been? Because Leslie's a Virgo like me.
And I find myself surrounded by Virgos as a Cancer. Like my cousin, who's my best friend, she's a Virgo. Like, Leslie's a Virgo.
Leslie's are super dependable. Although you sent me that meme.
Well, I feel like because and I'm a triple water sign, right? So a Cancer sun and moon and Pisces rising.
Wow.
So I'm just this like water floating, in itself. And so I feel like Virgos give me a container. I feel like Virgos give me that structure that I need, or I would be just a blob floating around, and so I think that's like there's this innate attraction to Virgos to give me that like grounding.
But my Gemini rising is a wild card. Like it's totally like what was the meme you sent me? Like, oh, Virgos are very stable.
They have all this earth energy and then this like random like and they're like, oh, it's because they have Gemini rising. Oh yeah.
I gotta get out. I gotta go somewhere. I gotta try something new. Curiosity.
Yeah.
I am so grateful for the story too. I think I didn't know, and this is just obviously just a little bit of your story, and it's so beautiful to hear how you came into, how you listened, and I think that's something that we don't have to talk about astrology that much, but Cancers, I just think you're such an inspiration, like, and maybe it's like your heart, your emotions, like they're there, right? I just changed therapists because I didn't cry in my first 3 therapy sessions. And I thought, oh, if I can't cry in my first 3 therapy sessions, they are not getting under the Virgo, like they're not getting past the
when she told me that, I was like, oh, that's your standard for a good therapist. Do they make you cry?
I think that's the gift. There's this gift of intuition. It's a very watery gift, I think.
Well, it's interesting, like when you were saying to Meenadchi that, why I think I was so drawn to when you were talking about the desk and the energy that's in the field, because as a Cancer, as a triple water sign, I feel everything. And because I feel everything and we live in a world that doesn't want us to feel, I find it really hard to handle my feelings. Like I get frustrated when any little thing triggers me and I go, like we always talk about our spirals, right? Like we're calling each other, I'm spiraling, and we're trying to like help each other out. And I get resentful of the fact that I feel everything. I really get like, fuck, I don't want to feel anything. And so we know how to disassociate really well. We know where to go in our heads. As a Cancer, I'm supposed to be able to cry, and I do, but I know how to not cry. I know how to like my cousin who's a Virgo and she cries all the time. When my father passed away and I read his eulogy and she was like, how did you do it without crying? And I was like, I just knew where to go in my head. I knew what to turn off, to just stay. And I don't think it's a good thing. It was just, I knew how to turn it off. And I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I don't want to disassociate. So then it becomes this battle of like feeling everything. And then not wanting to feel everything. So when you're talking about this desk, I get nervous about that. Like even this whole family constellation work, I'm like, oh God, I'm going to have to feel body sensations. Like I get really nervous about doing that because I was telling my therapist, she wants to do EMDR with me. And I'm like, I'm scared that I'm going to get stuck there.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that? Like, because I'm like, I don't want to get stuck in the abyss, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's very easy for me to, I know how to get to the point of feeling. It's the like getting not out of that, but then, or through it. Like, how do I get through it, you know?
Yeah. I think that's really valid. And I think it's why a lot of us don't want to do certain, because it's like the terror of, we know how bad it is down there and the terror of being stuck there. And because also if we've never gone swimming in those, how do I trust that I can get out? Also, how do I trust that like this practitioner, like, you don't know what I'm like when I flail, I'll pull you down, you know? And I'm noticing like it's almost like there's an answer. I can feel something underneath in my body. There's something there, but I don't have it in words yet. And I probably won't have it in words by the time, you know, this call ends. But I think,
Can I offer something that was coming to me? I don't want to interrupt, but I'm listening. I want to listen for that magic, but I also understand. And you're like, I was thinking about disassociation as maybe one of those things that isn't ours, you know, that it comes from, you know, the family lineage or whatnot, or it comes from a colonial, you know.
Well, it's definitely a coping and a survival mechanism of colonization, right? Like how do generations of colonized people survive if they don't disassociate?
And then all this fear around, you know, both like disassociating or feeling too much, like thinking of those as not like, you know, ours either. Like they come from a different. Because I think I would feel both responsible in that space.
Oh, I see.
I would
what you're
feel
saying.
like instead of taking the responsibility further back or taking the you know, seeing myself in the context of a larger story. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what it kind of occurred to me as you were talking. I thought I like the word constellation, actually, Aquarius moon. You know, I just love, you know, thinking of us with the stars, with like this this web of interconnectedness, you know, and sometimes seeing it within this framework instead of the web instead of like the ladder, you know, can really help. Just even that image, like as it impacts, you know, our story or the ways in which we feel or don't feel our emotions, you know. I too am terrified about like being in a really like depressed state like that, and maybe particularly as a parent, because and as a single parent, like so responsible. So I don't know how to go, or as a, you know, I don't know, we're going to speak at this conference, right, about women or mothers as like the head of the household, basically, you know, like there is just a lot that's going on.
It does feel like that. Like we can't go that deep because we still have shit to do. We still have to be moms, and we like, if we have a mental breakdown, the entire family breaks down. And so it does feel much like, not only are we afraid to go there but it almost feels like it's almost irresponsible because we have so many right? Yeah. like, oh no, we can't go there because we've got to make, and which then reminds me of like my mom. Of course, she didn't go to therapy and deal with stuff because she didn't have time when she's just trying to make sure we're living a life, like, so again, putting that other person's, she was like putting her own stuff aside. And so, she became the queen of disassociation because she had the responsibility, and she was the oldest of 6. So she had responsibility since the time she was a child,
Thinking I might have, ditched my therapist too fast. Like maybe I was I only have, an hour.
When this is my
get
like,
to it?
I feel like, so you and Priscilla, right? The two Virgos,
Yes.
really strong Virgos in my life. I have learned like sometimes that's just your Virgo. Like, I'm like, yeah, that's just part of their Virgo quirks when they have these like expectations.
I want to be efficient. I need to be efficient with my time. That's
and I'm
my
like,
big
okay,
thing.
that sounds good. If you need a therapist, just go for it.
What's your Venus in again? You just said
My
it.
Venus
Gemini.
is Gemini. I gotta
Yeah.
explore that one. Anyway, well, I think that we're coming up to our time, but I want to just give any space for anything else that you want to say about Family Constellation Therapy, and then of course tell us how we can work with you, or how anyone can work with you.
I think maybe the thing I'll say to close, which kind of ties to this last bit, was something, Cristina, that you said of like, there has to be something better than this, right? Like the reason why we go into a big motivation to do any healing work is because where we are, we've like finally decided is just not good enough. And what I would invite and encourage for folks who are feeling nervous about like going into it, because what happens if everything falls apart, is just go slow. Dip your toes in, read a book, listen to a podcast. Like this, your podcast is so incredibly healing. You know what I mean? Like the nervous system gets reset in a million different ways just by listening to people's experiences and stories. So just trusting that the pace you're going at is the right pace, and that it, that can be enough.
Yeah. Ugh. That feels so good. I feel anytime we do stuff like this, we're like, this is the church we needed as youngins. Thank you. Yeah. So tell us where people can find you, how they can work with you. Yeah. Any offerings coming up?
Okay. So my website is really easy. It's Meenadchi.com, which is my name, and then Instagram, which is with .Meenadchi. And then there's a wide way that people can work with me. One is obviously one-on-one sessions, but I also have practice groups, and those are I think practice groups are my love language, like to just come and sit in circle with each other and really, really just practice the skills. We meet monthly, and those are a really beautiful space. But there's a bunch of different ways, and also like recordings that you can watch if that's like a gentle way in. So if you pop over to my website, you'll find all of those things.
Love.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. And yeah, any last words for us?
Thanks for having me. I really admire and love the work that you do. So thanks for being here and doing it.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna close this. Intro and outro song is called Foreign Fog by The Corner House, a band that features our dear friend Danelia Arechiga.